Most ambitious people are secretly trapped by perfectionism and anxiety, constantly fighting to control every chaotic variable until they completely burn out. We usually try to solve this by simply grinding harder, not realizing that our own irrational, self-defeating beliefs are what actually block our success. 10 strategies of how to make a few more $1 billion. Serial CEO Brad Jacobs reveals that the ultimate solution is learning to rearrange your brain through mental synthesis and finding your center before making high-stakes decisions. He pairs this profound inner clarity with a ruthless, battle-tested playbook for M&A, technology integration, and scaling businesses to astronomical heights. If you want to stop thinking small and learn the exact blueprint to build a multi-billion-dollar legacy, this is the one guide you absolutely need to hear.
It's just such a wild contradiction, right? I mean, you look at these sources and you have this man who has engineered, I think, roughly 500 massive corporate takeovers.
Yeah, 500. That's insane.
Right. Creating tens of billions in shareholder value. And his absolute non-negotiable secret weapon is sitting still and meditating.
Yeah.
So in this deep dive, we're really going to explore how merging this incredibly deep psychological work with, aggressive corporate consolidation is kind of his ultimate formula. It really is about mastering yourself so you can completely master the market.
Exactly. So let's just look at the actual playbook he uses, starting right where he does. Strategy 1, rearrange your brain, find your center. Because before you can even think about conquering a global market, Jacobs argues you really have to conquer your own mind.
Right.
And he doesn't just mean like eating healthy and getting a good night's sleep. He has been meditating intensely since he was 14 years old.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here is how he roots this practice in actual biology. He focuses on a concept that cognitive scientists call mental synthesis.
Okay, mental synthesis. What is that exactly?
Well, it's basically the evolutionary leap that allowed early humans to combine totally disparate memories to imagine scenarios that don't actually exist yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's the biological foundation of all forward thinking, strategy, and creativity. So Jacobs leverages this deliberate visualization. He talks about a specific technique he developed called feeling the brain.
Feeling the brain. That sounds intense.
It really is. He quite literally visualizes his awareness floating to the exact intersection in the dead center of his brain. And by focusing his consciousness there, he triggers these really intense bursts of creativity and deep rejuvenation.
I was reading that and picturing it like plugging an imaginary cord from your spine directly into a high voltage outlet.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it.
It's just an instant mental reboot.
But I have to ask, if you are a listener who manages a team, or if you deal in logistics and billion-dollar supply chains, why care so much about something that sounds, almost mystical?
Oh, because clarity gives you a massive operational edge.
Yeah.
Just think about your own day-to-day. When you're making decisions under extreme pressure, panic and mental fog are like your greatest liabilities.
Right, for sure. So finding that center isn't about escaping reality to just feel peaceful. It's about grounding yourself so deeply that you can perceive reality without the distortion of your own biases or ego or anxieties. You simply cannot make a billion-dollar maneuver if you are secretly driven by the fear of looking foolish.
That makes total sense, which naturally brings us to how you maintain that clarity when things, inevitably go wrong. Strategy 2, master radical acceptance, kill perfectionism. Because you find your center, but the business world is chaotic.
Oh, incredibly chaotic.
You are definitely going to get knocked off balance. So Jacobs relies on what he calls a recentering toolbox. And this is where the psychology gets really, really practical.
Yeah, you absolutely need a systemic way to recover. Jacobs leans pretty heavily on clinical psychological frameworks, specifically dialectical behavior therapy, or DBT, and rational emotive behavior therapy, REBT.
Okay, that's a lot of acronyms. Let's break those down a bit.
Sure. Let's start with DBT. From that, he pulls the concept of radical acceptance. This basically means acknowledging the reality of a situation entirely, without arguing against it or wishing it were different. Right. And then from Albert Ellis's REBT, he learned to identify irrational, rigid demands. Think about that classic, I must succeed perfectly mindset.
Oh, yeah, the trap so many of us fall into.
Exactly. So he reframes those rigid demands into flexible preferences. He actively weaves this imperfection mindset into his corporate cultures because mistakes are the literal substance of growth.
I am going to push back on that, though. I mean, if you're listening to this and you hold yourself to a really high standard, doesn't radical acceptance and embracing mistakes just sound like I don't know, giving up.
I get why you'd say that.
Right, because if I'm building an empire, shouldn't I demand absolute perfection from my team?
It sounds counterintuitive, but demanding perfection actually creates extreme fragility. Like, radical acceptance isn't resignation at all. It is the ruthless elimination of wishful thinking.
Oh, interesting.
Think of it this way. If a crucial vendor backs out, a perfectionist wastes vital energy being furious that it happened. They argue with reality.
Right, they get stuck on the why did this happen to me?
Exactly. Radical acceptance means saying, okay, the vendor is gone. That is a fact. What is our next move? When you stop throwing a tantrum that gravity exists, you can make cold, logical decisions based on what's actually happening. You deal with the reality on the board, not the reality you wish you had.
Okay, I love that. So you have this resilient, centered mindset. You are operating on facts. Now we turn our focus outward to choose the right battlefield. Strategy 3, hunt massive, fragmented markets. Jacobs has a very specific, totally non-negotiable checklist for picking an industry to consolidate.
He really does.
And it starts with sheer scale.
Scale is everything for him. He looks exclusively at the total addressable market, or TAM. You simply cannot build a $50 billion business in an industry that only generates $25 billion, you know?
Right, the math literally doesn't work.
Exactly. For his newest venture, QXO, he spent over a year analyzing 600 companies across 55 different industries.
600?
Yeah. And he finally selected the building products distribution industry. Why? Because it is an $800 billion TAM.
Wow. 800 billion.
But, scale alone isn't enough. The second crucial factor is fragmentation. He actively looks for industries packed with thousands of smaller players where no single company dominates the space.
I like to think of the TAM as a physical playing field.
Yeah.
If you were playing on a tiny field, one misstep puts you entirely out of bounds.
Yes.
But on a trillion-dollar field, you have the room to execute aggressive M&A, make a few of those mistakes we talked about earlier, and still have endless blue sky above you.
That's a great analogy. And the fragmentation is what acts as the open invitation. In a highly fragmented market, those small mom-and-pop players just don't have the capital to invest in massive efficiencies. They can't optimize. So a giant consolidator can step in, roll up those companies, apply scale, and achieve what Jacobs refers to as obscene profits.
Obscene profits, I like the sound of that. Which leads right into where those massive efficiencies come from. Strategy 4, exploit tech-backward industries. Because, you would think a visionary CEO would want to acquire shiny, modern, tech-forward companies.
You think so, yeah.
But he deliberately hunts for sectors that are stuck in the past.
He does. He specifically targets industries still running on Excel spreadsheets, clipboards, and just gut instinct. Take old school warehousing, for example.
Right.
He has walked into acquisitions where inventory is tracked literally on paper and products are stored randomly just because, there was an empty spot on a shelf.
Oh man, that sounds like a nightmare.
But to Jacobs, that inefficiency isn't a problem at all. It is raw, untapped potential. By coming in and deploying advanced automation, AI-driven demand forecasting, and strategic slotting algorithms, the acquiring company immediately becomes the ultimate disruptor.
But wait, isn't it a massive headache to force cutting-edge tech onto an industry that naturally resists change? I mean, changing human behavior is notoriously difficult, especially if, a warehouse manager has been doing it on paper for 30 years.
Oh, it's a massive human challenge. But the mechanism of how he overcomes it is by making the ROI undeniable to everyone involved. You don't just hand them an iPad and walk away.
Right.
You show them how the technology removes the absolute most painful parts of their daily jobs. It transforms that warehouse from a chaotic, bleeding cost center into a highly efficient margin booster.
So it actually makes their lives easier.
Exactly. You get faster fulfillment and fewer mistakes, which means way less stress for the workers and massive economies of scale for the business. It gives you a multi-year head start over competitors who are just, frankly, too afraid of that human resistance to make the leap themselves.
Okay, so we know the target. Massive, fragmented, and tech backward. Now you have to actually buy your way in. Strategy 5. Never overpay for an acquisition. Jacobs has an absolute golden rule here, and he does not bend it for anyone.
Never. Overpaying is the cardinal sin of M&A. Period. If you overpay, you instantly destroy shareholder value before you have even begun the integration.
Right.
So Jacobs relies on a financial mechanism called multiple arbitrage.
Okay, can we break that down? Because how does multiple arbitrage actually work For the listener who, isn't a Wall Street banker.
Yeah, let's keep it really simple. Let's say your company trades on the stock market at a valuation of 15 times its profits.
Okay, 15.
You go out and buy a smaller private company, but you only pay 5 times their profits. The second you legally absorb them, the stock market now values their profits at your 15 times multiple.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have literally tripled the perceived value of their earnings overnight just by bringing them under your umbrella.
That's incredible.
But if you pay 15 times earnings for them in the first place, that arbitrage totally vanishes. You get 0 instant value. And this is so critical to him that he will abandon incredible ideas if the math just doesn't work.
Really? Like what?
Well, the sources highlight how he wanted to roll up exchange-traded funds, or ETFs.
Wow, ETFs are huge.
Right. It looked great on paper, but the acquisition multiples for the targets were simply too high. So he just walked away.
It really is like house flipping then. If you pay top dollar for a fixer-upper, I don't care how beautiful your renovations are, you are never going to make a profit.
Exactly.
You make your money on the buy. Discipline has to override excitement every single time.
That is the perfect way to look at it. If the purchase price doesn't leave room for a massive return on invested capital through operational improvements, he simply won't do the deal.
Okay, the deal is signed at the right price. Strategy 6, the day one integration blitz. Because according to Jacobs, the clock immediately starts ticking on realizing that value.
And this is exactly where most M&A fails.
Yeah, the acquirer buys a company and then lets the legacy structures linger for months, trying to be, polite. Jacobs negotiates for unrestricted access to the target company's data and leadership before the deal even closes.
Wow, before it closes. Right. He wants to prevent what he calls blind date syndrome, where employees and customers are just left in the dark. His strategy is the Band-Aid approach. You rip it off quickly.
Ouch.
Yeah. You hold massive town halls, you look legacy employees in the eye, and you integrate the IT and HR systems at maximum controlled speed.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. If you're a manager listening to this, doesn't sprinting through an integration and ripping the Band-Aid off cause absolute panic among the new employees? I mean, you are completely upending their world overnight.
It sounds incredibly harsh, I know, but you have to look at the psychology of the alternative.
Okay.
Jacobs found that festering uncertainty is actually far more damaging to human beings than sudden change. When people don't know if they'll even have a job in 3 months, morale completely plummets. They literally stop working.
Oh yeah, they're just updating their resumes.
Exactly. And worse, your competitors swoop in to poach your best talent and your best customers. So speed kills that anxiety. It replaces the agonizing fear of the unknown with momentum, clarity, and a new mission.
That makes a lot of sense. But to move at that kind of speed, you obviously need a chain of command that functions flawlessly. Strategy 7, ruthlessly redesign the org chart. You can't run a blitz integration if nobody knows who they report to.
You really can't, and that requires a very methodical transformation of the organizational structure. Jacobs standardizes the spans and layers across the new acquisition so it mirrors his existing high-performance machine.
Right.
He purposefully over-organizes the integration phase. That means assigning specific granular tasks to named individuals with explicit accountability. He establishes this relentless cadence of daily and weekly check-ins.
Wow, that's intense.
Very.
Yeah.
There is absolutely no ambiguity about who's doing what or when it is due.
But if you are coming in and ruthlessly redesigning their org chart, how do you not destroy the culture of the company you just bought? People hold a lot of pride in the businesses they help build.
And that is the real secret sauce of his playbook. While he's redesigning the rigid structure, he's fiercely protective of the organic, good parts of their culture.
How does he do that?
He does this by bypassing middle management completely and asking the frontline workers directly, like, what are we doing well that we would be crazy to change? And what is your best idea to improve this business?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. By actively listening to the people actually driving forklifts or making sales calls, he blends the best of both cultures. It creates immediate, genuine buy-in because the employees actually feel heard, not just conquered.
Structure is great, but let's talk about the people inside it. Strategy 8. Purge C players, overpay A players.
Yeah.
Because an optimized org chart is completely useless if you don't have the absolute best talent sitting in those seats.
Right. Talent evaluation has to happen at lightning speed, usually within weeks of closing the deal. Jacobs operates on a very clear taxonomy.
Okay, what's the taxonomy?
First, you identify the superstars, the A players who align with the vision, drive results, and really elevate everyone around them. Next, you identify the B players who are, competent but perhaps in the wrong role or just need strong coaching to become A players. And then you face the hard, uncomfortable truth. You don't need to keep everyone.
The C players.
Exactly. C players, those who drag down the culture, resist change, or consistently miss metrics, they are let go quickly. You purge the underperformers so you can afford to generously reward your top tier.
It is exactly like taking over a sports franchise. You keep the MVPs, you intensely train the rookies who have high potential, and you trade away the roster fillers because you just cannot afford dead weight in a championship run.
The perfect comparison.
But there's a deeper psychological angle here too, right? What happens to your A players if you let the C players stick around?
That is the absolute most crucial insight. Tolerating C players is the fastest way to demotivate an A player. High performers totally resent having to carry the weight of underperform.
Wow, 100%.
By purging the C players quickly, you signal to your A players that excellence is the new non-negotiable standard. High performers actually love working in demanding environments where mediocrity isn't tolerated. It unlocks their loyalty.
So we had the internal talent and the structure aligned. Strategy 9. Unify under one powerful brand. Jacobs insists that this internal alignment must be matched by a unified external perception.
Yes. It's about the psychological power of high-speed rebranding. When you leave old legacy brands operating under their original names, you perpetuate an us versus them mindset. The employees still think of themselves as the acquired company.
Right, they don't feel like part of the new team.
Exactly. So Jacobs weeds out the old brands immediately. He executes total branch makeovers overnight. This creates a massive wow factor in the market. Employees get new swag, they take before and after photos of their newly branded buildings, and they post them online.
Oh, that's smart.
It generates this contagious pride that money simply cannot buy.
I read that and wondered, in the middle of a billion-dollar financial merger with all these complex moving parts, is spending time and money on new T-shirts, coffee mugs, and building signs really that important? It almost sounds like window dressing.
It sounds trivial, but it is a physical manifestation of a profound psychological shift. It plants a flag in the ground.
Okay, I see that.
Think about how humans operate. When an employee puts on that new uniform, they aren't legacy company X anymore. They are part of a massive, unified global powerhouse. It instantly dissolves those old tribal loyalties. It unites everyone under a single shared vision and tells the market and the employees that a new era has officially started.
Which brings us to the grand finale, Strategy 10. Weaponize pricing and procurement data. The culture is unified. The talent is locked in. Now, you flip the switch on the technology to extract those obscene profits we talked about.
This is where all the groundwork really pays off. Jacobs often buys companies that are running on what he calls a tech heap. He has literally seen acquisitions running on 35 different ERP systems.
Like 35?
35 enterprise resource planning systems simultaneously across different branches. It's madness. So his final ruthless strategy is forcing every single part of the combined company onto one single integrated tech stack and a centralized data lakehouse.
I want to make sure everyone understands this. Trying to run a company with 35 different ERPs is like trying to drive a car where the steering wheel, the pedals, and the speedometer all speak totally different languages.
Exactly.
Unifying the data puts you in the driver's seat. But what exactly is a data lakehouse in this context?
Imagine 35 different file cabinets in 35 different rooms, all using completely different alphabetical systems. A data lakehouse is dumping all of those files into one massive, instantly searchable digital vault.
Okay, that makes sense.
When everyone is on one system, leadership can use real-time digital dashboards. Suddenly, you can instantly benchmark the performance of a branch in Ohio against a branch in Germany. You can forecast demand using AI. You can optimize pricing globally, literally minute by minute based on supply chain shifts.
Well,
You're no longer guessing.
Right.
You are weaponizing your data to squeeze every single drop of margin out of the operation.
So, bringing this all together for you listening right now, we have journeyed from meditating in the dead center of your brain to ripping out 35 ERP systems to maximize global profit margins.
And it leaves us with a truly profound irony to mull over. Consider this, the most aggressive, ruthless corporate tactics in the world, massive M&A, blitz integrations, sweeping tech overhauls, are entirely dependent on the quietest, most internal practice of all, Sitting still, meditating, and finding your center. You cannot master the chaos of the global market until you have fully mastered the chaos inside your own head.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, follow up in next video.